Test. Okay, hey class, this is Professor Roberts. As I mentioned earlier on Discord, the recording from last Thursday's class, the visuals didn't come through, so that's not very useful. So I'm just going to re-record that demo real quick. So I'm going to go over everything that we covered. There's a few things. I'm just going to make a little list of what we need to cover. So we covered masking, we covered adjustments, we covered blending, and we covered filters. I don't need to save that. I'm just going to leave that over here. And I also talked a little bit about image sources, so I'll go over that again for just a second at the beginning. So yeah, since I'm not in class right now, I might go a little bit faster than I normally do. You can always just pause the video if you need to. If you have any questions, just send me a message on Discord. I'm happy to go over any of this individually on Discord at some point or in class as well. So I made a copy of my project folder, which I just downloaded. I'm on my home computer, which obviously is a Mac and not a PC. You'll see that pretty much everything is the same except for, the Finder is a little bit different than the File Explorer, but pretty much everything else works the same way. So here's my Photoshop intro. If I open up this intro.psd, this is where we were at the end of class. Fortunately, since I have my original images, I can just delete everything that I created as I was going over stuff and just go back to our original images. And I'll just recreate this process. I don't really know what that was. Let's just get rid of this layer, and there we go. So we want to composite these two images together. That's kind of the main topic of this lecture, is different ways of compositing. So let's put that on here. So all of this falls under the compositing area. And what is compositing? Well, compositing is a process of combining visual elements from separate sources into single images. And why is this important? Um, it's the way that most different types of media are made. And so we're not always compositing two random images. Sometimes we're compositing text or animation or different things like that. But it's basically looking at different techniques of making things look like they go together in one piece of media when they really come from different places. And it's also just a good way to cover some of the basic tools in Photoshop. Composite, let's just look at that word by itself. So a composite is made up of various parts or elements. So a thing that's made up of various parts or elements. So it's a long word to say just that we're combining stuff in an image. Okay, so um, since I took these notes here, I do know where I got these images from. So even though they're in my Photoshop document, so I don't really need to download them again. But this is the importance of taking notes. Let's say that I wanted to start completely from scratch. I could take this URL, I could paste it in here, and then I could see where I got this image from originally. I can download it. I can look at the Creative Commons license and the author and different things like that. So that is going to be, you guys want to keep that in mind. That is going to be ultimately part of your grade. And one thing that I covered kind of briefly in class is how to find these images. So the website I'm using is pexels.com. There's a lot of different sites like this. If you just Google like Creative Commons media images, something like that, you'll come up with lots of different websites that host these kind of things. Flickr is usually photographs taken by different people. There's lots of different stuff on here. Another way to do this, if you just want to use Google, if I go to like images.google.com and I search for a cat, if I want to make sure the images I'm looking at are free to use, I can go to this tools button right here and go to usage rights and go to Creative Commons licenses. And so this will filter all the images so that I only see images that I can use for free. So we see Flickr, we see Wikimedia Commons, Pexels, the website I mentioned before, Public Domain, Raw Pixel. All these different websites have either only free Creative Commons licensed images, or they have a way of filtering to find that style of image. So, as I mentioned in class, since we are working on student projects, it's not super likely that, the creator of of an image is going to come after you for some copyright infringement. Um, but eventually, if you when you graduate and you start to do work in the real world, this is something that you're going to have to be aware of, because you're not going to want to get sued for the content that you're creating by original creators, and you also just want to be a nice, ethical person in the world. So those are things that we want to learn how to do. Okay, so let's go back to Photoshop and talking about masking. And so masking is a process of removing not necessarily the background, but an area of an image so that we only see part of the rest of the image. And so what I want to do with this image is I want to mask out this background. So I just have the lizard and the stick, part of the stick, and I'm going to composite that into the image behind it, which is this little cat image. So there's nothing significant about the images that I'm using. I just looked up a couple animals and downloaded the first images that looked good to me. And so that's what I'm going to work on. So you could, you don't necessarily have to be adding an image into another image. You could add lots of other things to each other, but that's just what I'm doing for this demo. Um, and in Photoshop, this used to be a lot more challenging. We used to have to use different tools, and a lot of the time you would go in with a pen, tablet, and really have to draw around the shape that you wanted to composite. These days, it's actually quite easy. We have this tool called the Object Selection tool, which is usually one of the main tools in your toolbar over here. And pretty much you can just draw that on the screen. Oh, it didn't give me. There we go. So I just drew over this lizard, and it pretty much just picked it out for me. If I draw over the hand, I don't really want that. I think I can get rid of this if I hold Shift and click on it. Is that going to get rid of it? Yeah. But I don't really want this. So one thing I can do to get rid of the selection and start over, I can go to Select and click Deselect. I can also do that by hitting Command D. But you can see this thing is really sophisticated. Basically, as soon as I get close to this lizard, it pretty much knows that's what I want. I don't actually want that part, so I'm just going to click on the pink area of the lizard itself. And here I've got the selection that I want to use. So this really saves me a lot of time. We're going to refine this mask a little bit just to show what that would look like. I did forget to duplicate my layer, so I'm going to go ahead and do that and make a copy of this layer. The mask is still there, so that's fine. And then I'm just going to click on this, and I can't click my mask button. So let's click on this again. I'm going to hide this image, or maybe we'll just get this one. Okay, my mask button is not appearing. Okay, we have the selection. Oh, my layer's locked. Whoops, because I locked the originals earlier. Anyways, I had accidentally locked the layer, so I just unlocked it, and now all I'm going to do, I've got the selection I like, and I'm just going to click on the mask button, and there we go. That mask is gone. And so now I can move this guy around, and what I'm going to do ultimately later is put the cat in front of this stick, but now I've got my lizard next to my cat. I played with the size a little bit in class of the lizard, but I couldn't get it exactly where I wanted it, but I'm just gonna try that. Okay, so we have this mask, and one thing that you're going to notice is if I zoom in a lot, and I'm just holding Option and scroll wheel to do this, and then I'm using the spacebar to move around, you can see there's this weird green outline on the lizard, and that's actually a little bit of the background that we just masked out. There's also a couple areas where we see a few pixels of that that background. So the mask worked really well, but it's not perfect. So I'm not going to fix this 100% because that would take me some time. What I'm going to do is just do give examples of a couple quick fixes that I can do. So let's get rid of this outline. I'm going to zoom into a part of the image where the outline is quite clear to see, because sometimes, whoops, I dragged it. Let's Okay, I undid that. So I just want to move it somewhere where I can see it very clearly. And so the green against the green is kind of hard to see. So this green against the the stick is quite easy to see. And now I can actually edit the mask by double clicking on this layer, and I can say enter select and mask. And this is going to bring up this new window where I can still zoom in and zoom out. And now I don't see now I see the background again. And what I want to do is I want to be able to see where the mask starts and ends. There's a couple of different views for this. So I can show my little dotted line. I can show a red overlay, which is what I like to use just because that's how it used to show up by default. I can show a black background, white background. I can show the inverse. I can show on the layers. I like this red for whatever reason. That's how they used to default here. You can actually change the color if you want to, but I'm just going to stick with this. And then you can also change the opacity of the red if you want a better look at it. And the nice thing about this is I can either add or subtract to the red and add or subtract to my mask. So if I wanted to, oops, what is it doing? Brush tool, quick select. Okay, I want the brush tool. Okay, there we go. I had the wrong tool selected. I guess it usually, I don't know why it was doing that. Anyway, see, I can take away the mask by using the brush tool, but then if I hold the option key, Alt Option, I can actually add to the mask and remove more of the lizard. But that's not what I want to do quite yet. What I want to do is get rid of this outline. So let's move this into view again. And so there's a couple of ways that I can do this. One is I can use this property down here called Shift Edge, and you'll see what happens if I shift the edge all the way to the right. Now that green outline, there's more of it. And if I shift it all the way to the left, now it kind of comes in and it grabs that a little bit. So I want to shift the edge a little bit until I don't see any green. Okay, but now it starts to get kind of pixelated and square and bumpy. So I can smooth that out a little bit, but that is also going to eat into my edge. So then I want to shift the edge a little bit back. Okay, that looks okay, not perfect, but let's turn the smooth down a little bit. That's a little too dramatic. And then we can also feather, and feather means it's kind of like fading a little bit of that. So I don't want to feather too much. I think 1 pixel is probably enough. Um, and so now that's not really perfect. Actually, I think that feather is well, maybe I don't need the smooth and the feather. Okay, that looks a little bit better. You can play around with those settings. The main thing is that green outline is gone now, and that's really what we want. So I'm going to click OK, and now we come back, and I still do see a little bit of an outline around my lizard, but it's not quite as clear. And so I could keep refining that until I get it perfect. I'm not going to worry about that right now. You can see it's a little bit better. I think probably what I need to do is just shift the edge a little bit more. And okay, that's good enough. So the next thing I want to point out is, okay, so that didn't fix these like little green areas where I have these details. So if I want to fix that, I can go back into my mask and then I can take my brush and I need to make the brush smaller. I can do this, whoops, by going up to the brush settings up here and changing the size. And I really want it to be like 1 pixel because I'm really just like adding just like a few pixels to this edge here. Okay, so this is if I was like doing really crazy detailed work and I wanted to be perfect. I got rid of that thing, although there's a little bit right here. So let's go back in there. I'm holding Alt Option to do minus, which is really adding to the mask or subtracting more of the color. So yeah, that looks pretty good. Again, I could spend a lot more time refining this, but that is the basic idea of editing my mask. So now I have my lizard masked into my scene. So the next bit I want to talk about, that was masking. Now we're going to talk about some adjustments. So there's a lot of different types of adjustments, but basically what adjustments do is change the overall color in different ways. Like you can change the exposure, you can change the light dark balance, the hue. And what I want to do is I want to match the color of this lizard a little bit closer to the color of my main photo of the cat. You can see the lizard is much brighter. There's a lot more highlights. The cat is a little bit more subdued. It's a little more blurred out. So I'm going to use some adjustments to do that. And these adjustments I'm going to apply just to this one layer. So to do that, I have to make sure I have the layer selected, and I go to Image Adjustments, And there's a lot of different things here. I don't have time to go over all of them, but I'm just going to show a couple that I use a lot. So the main one that I actually use, this is like my go-to, is just the levels. We'll also look at curves, and we can look at, let's see if there's any others. I think I did shadows, highlights in class. Honestly, all these things do slightly different things, but they kind of have similar outcomes. So you're just gonna have to play with different things and see how they work. So levels is just like an easy way of changing the overall color value. So there's different color channels. There's red, green, and blue. I'm gonna change all three. And on the right here is bright colors. On the left here is dark colors. So if I move this, we see those dark colors get brought up. If we move this, we see those light colors get brought up. If we move the middle, we see these midtones get brought up. And then if we change the output levels down here, if we move away from the dark, we get just light colors, and same thing over here. So I'm going to do a couple quick things here. I'm going to cancel this and reset it. So I'm going to go back to levels. I'm going to just bring down the output a little bit because the cat is definitely darker. And then I might bring up this middle value a little bit because there are some nice tones in the cat. So it's not like it's completely devoid of color, but it's just a darker, more washed out um, image. So I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to click OK. And you can turn this on and off just like you can your layers. So I can turn my layer on and off with the eyeball, but I can also turn on and off my adjustments, which are called smart filters here, and I can move them up and down. So that looks pretty good. Let's try another adjustment. I'm going to try the curves adjustment. This is just like a finer way of adding detail here. Another thing that a lot of these adjustments have are some good presets. So if you look in the presets, you can see, oh, if I want something lighter, if I want something darker, if I want a negative, strong contrast, there's all these different things. So I want something a little bit darker, and it's going to add this curve for me. And the curve basically just like changes the color profile a little bit. And then we can also add some stuff. So if I want to bring up these dark tones, I can do that a little bit and bring down the light tones a little bit. Or I can do the opposite, and I can get some crazy effects that way. You don't want to go too wild here if you're going for realism. I'm just going to bring down this color a little bit and then bump up that a little bit. There we go. Okay, no, that's a little too much. Okay, um, so that kind of looks better. I don't know. I'm not going to spend a ton of time making it perfect because it's just a demo, but you can see that I'm starting to get closer to the vibe of the cat image with my lizard. So they look like they're occupying the same space a little bit more than they did previously. So that's another way of doing compositing, is making these kind of adjustments to change the way things look. Okay, so another thing that I can do, if I want to make an adjustment to both images at the same time, to my whole area, I can add a layer for an adjustment. I'm going to bring my layers up here for a second, and I'm going to go to adjustments over here. And so let's say I want to do an adjustment to my whole image. I'm going to do the same one I did in class, which is this gradient map, because it's a little bit easier to see because it is very stylized. We have this kind of like default here. And so I can add this gradient map, and if I drag it down, you can see it just applies to the layers that are below it. So if the gradient map is the very top layer, it applies to my lizard and my cat. And if I bring it down here, then it's just the cat. So this is a way that I can apply an adjustment to multiple layers at the same time. And you can see this actually really helps to make it look like they're in the same image because it's just hyper stylized. It's not photorealistic anymore, so we don't really see the difference in lighting quite as much. But let's see if we change those filters, you do see, I did actually do a decent job of making it look like they're in the same place with this gradient map on. Anyway, let's go back to our gradient map and let's edit it. So the gradient editor is a lot of fun. We can pick some defaults. We could try some pastels, and then we can actually change, how the colors are distributed. I can add a color in here, and then I can change how fast the colors change. I could add something totally wacky. I can double click on this and add in black or a white. That's actually kind of nice with this black, adding some dark tones to the highlights. So I'm getting kind of the opposite. And I just noticed there's this highlight in the cat's eye that actually kind of looks like, am I being crazy or does that kind of look like me? I guess that's just the photographer in the scene. I think I'm maybe losing it a little bit. Anyway, let's fix this gradient a little bit. I'm going to move this over and move this in a little bit. And we don't need this one. Let's make this one just a little bit darker. There we go. That's kind of cool. And then let's make this one actually a bit brighter. And so now we kind of have this stylized image where we're like really making all these highlights black, which is kind of goofy, but that's just an example of something kind of wild you can do with an adjustment, and we can turn that on and off like that. Okay, so those are some adjustments. We can also change the blending. So if we want, let's take this, if we click on these layers, you can see the blend mode is right here. There's also an opacity. So this is how much the layer gets blended in with the others. And so for example, if I take the opacity of the lizard and I turn it all the way down, it's going to be gone. Or I can kind of make it look like a little bit of a ghost if I take the opacity out a little bit. That's kind of cool. Um, but what I can also do is change the blending mode, which is the way that the pixels get added together. The default is just normal. They just get added on top of each other. But let's turn this off for a second. If I do some other types of blend modes, you can see there's these different ways that the pixels get added to the rest of the image. And so I can do that actually with my adjustment so that it's not just completely overwriting the color data, but it's actually just adding this kind of tint to it. So I'm going to turn the opacity down. Actually, let's turn the opacity up and then we'll move that down later. So I can darken the image, I can multiply, color burn. There's all these different ways that it kind of adds the data of the adjustment to the image. Some of them are more complex than others. And then some of them are very kind of over the top. So I'm going to go with something nice. This soft light is really nice. It really just adds like a little bit of a tone to it. And I'll turn down the opacity. So we really see a lot of the original color with just this kind of added uh, gradient on top. So that looks pretty cool. So the next thing that I want to talk about is filters. Again, there's a lot of other blending modes. There's a lot of other ways to do this stuff. I'm just kind of going quickly through this stuff just to introduce it. But let's look at filters real quick. So filters are another way that I can kind of stylize an image. And there's a lot of weird stuff that you can do with a filter. Um, Oh, I mentioned before I want to cover up this stick. So what I'm going to do is add a filter to the cat background, but first I'm going to take the cat out of the background. So I'm going to duplicate my cat layer real quick. This will be a good chance to double up masking. So I'm actually going to use both of these. I'm going to take the cat out of this, and then I'm going to filter this background a little bit. So what I'm going to do, so I want to get rid of the background. So I'm going to take my object picker, and I'm going to pick, I think it'll pick the background pretty well. It's thinking a little bit. Okay, let me just get a bigger area. No. Okay, it's trying to read the white space, which it's not going to do a good job. So let's just pick our cat, and then I can hold shift and I can add our basket. And there we go. That's pretty good. So I'm going to add a mask here. Okay, so now we still see the background because we do have the original image behind it, but I can drag this cat above my lizard so that basket is blocking it out. And it's very blurry, so let's go in here and why is it so blurry? I guess that's just in the original image. So let's smooth this out a little bit. That doesn't really help. Let's shift the edge. Okay, if we shift the edge in and feather it, okay, that's a little bit better. It looks kind of whack, but I'm not gonna spend too much time here. Okay, now let's move the lizard over. Or no, it looks like the lizard is, oh, because I didn't, yeah, I can't really get away with that. So let's just undo a couple times. So that looks pretty bad, but you know what, I'm not gonna worry about it for now. I'm just gonna leave it as is. And now I'm gonna apply a filter to this cat background to stylize this even more. I'm going to go to filter. Oh, I have to unlock this layer first. So I'm going to go to filter. And then there's all these different things you can do. Blur, it's already pretty blurry. That's not gonna do anything. Noise, I can add some cool noise. But the cool ones are these pixelate ones or stylize. You can do some really weird stuff. So I'm gonna go to pixelate and mosaic. And let's increase the cell size a little bit. This is how I got that effect last time. So it's this kind of weird blacky effect, which I kind of like. It's only featuring the cat data right now, which is too bad. I should have kept the lizard image. Maybe I could have blended them together. I guess I could still do that. I'm not going to do it right now. Okay, so I like that. I'm going to save this. And there we go. That's pretty much everything I covered in class last time. So let me know if you have any questions, and we're going to pick up from here in our next class.